And we're live.
Thank you. So I will call to order this Finance Committee meeting for February 18th, 2025. And so if everyone wants to introduce themselves, I'm Deanna Glenn, Chair.
Vanessa Burdick, City Councilor. Krishna Moody, Acting City Manager.
Josh Engels, Chief Financial Officer.
Julie Hoy, Mayor.
Paul Tigan, City Council, Ward 1.
Shane Matthews, City Council Ward 3, alternate this committee.
Staff.
And then staff. No, go ahead.
Oh, okay, hi, I'm Courtney Knox-Bush and I work in the Mayor and City Manager's Office. I'm Shannon.
Okay, sorry.
I'm
Sorry, you were behind.
I'm Shannon Thomas and I'm the head of the City Finance.
Dan Atchison, City Attorney.
Did everyone have an opportunity to review the minutes? Should we have people online? Or
Oh, yeah, have them introduce themselves.
those of you online, did you want to introduce yourselves?
Sure. Hi, I'm Jenny Matichek. I'm the chief accountant for the city.
And I am Anya Hill. I'm the treasurer.
Ryan?
I'm Ryan Pascarella. I work for RADW. We're the independent auditors for the city.
Hi, I'm Callie Leinenbach, budget manager in finance.
Tammy?
Sure, I'm Tammy Lore Schweitzer. I'm a director with Moss Adams.
Did we get everybody?
See, Jeremy.
Oh,
I guess it didn't hear me. Sorry, Jeremy Morgan, city, or I should say, accounting supervisor with the city.
okay. Did everyone have an opportunity to review the minutes from the January 21st, 2025 meeting?
Viewing now. I move to approve.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Motion passes. So we don't have any public comment. No action items. So we'll move to management update and information items.
Thank you. We have 3 items for you today. RADW with Ryan, he'll go first, followed by Tammy with Moss Adams for the Enterprise Leadership Team Performance Audit. And we have one small extra there at 5B. We'll switch around the next performance audit just due to capacity constraints. So we'll talk about that really quickly. And then 5C, we're not going to talk about it in depth unless you have questions. But this year in 2025, second quarter. So, nothing. We'll turn it over to Ryan with RADW.
All right. Jenny, did you want to say something first before I get going, or is it all me?
I could do a quick little introduction. So we're excited to be able to present and report out on the FY24 annual comprehensive financial report, or as we refer to the ACFR. It was another challenging year, but good year. We were able to issue on time this year and did not have to file for extension, which we've needed to the last couple of years. So the team put in a lot of great work and it was great working with the auditors again. So I'll let Ryan take it over.
Well, that's all I was going to say, Jenny. I guess I'm done now, right? Okay, maybe not. Thank you, Jenny. My name is Ryan Pascarella. I used to be with a firm named Grove Mueller and Swank here in Salem. About almost a year and a half ago now, my firm merged with RADW, which is more of a regional auditing firm. And so we basically quadrupled in size of our auditing team at this point. But we are happy to be the city's auditors and continue with that. And luckily, we've had very little turnover with our staff. So as Jenny, was mentioning, the audit went fairly smoothly. There's some consistency on your side as far as your finance department and on my side, which really just makes things go well. I am here to talk briefly about the fiscal year 24 audit that was completed. We finished the audit We actually got everything done on December 31st, which was the due date. Jenny, hopefully next year, we're not down to New Year's Eve getting things out the door. I think that's a great goal for both of us to do, because nobody wants to be doing that on New Year's Eve or anything.
Yeah, I think we'll definitely see improvements on the leases and subscriptions with new technology and just knowing it a little bit better.
You got it. The last few years have been a little bit difficult as far as the financial reporting side of things due to new standards related to how leases are being presented in the financial statements, and a new one, which is subscription-based IT arrangements. Basically your software agreements that you have and how those are being tracked. And a lot of work by the finance department and the individual departments just to put the information together to help get the financial statements out the door. So we are now past year 2 on that information. So hopefully we have better processes in place to kind of make it go smoother and get things issued a little bit sooner. My audit, my team's audit, really, there are 3 individual audits that are being done as part of this process. The first audit is Salem Convention Center, which we do end of July, beginning of August, somewhere in there. There's an audit for the Urban Renewal Agency, which is due on December 31, and then the city is due on December 31 as well. So we're actually making multiple visits, not only to the city, but to the convention center, working through the stuff. Right about the end of June, beginning of July in there, we always come and we visit the city. And as part of that, we're going to the individual departments to see kind of what those processes are as far as collecting money. If there's like purchase cards, look to see kind of what those processes are. Make sure really nothing's changed as far as your processes year over year. And if there are changes, we're going to dig in quite a bit just to make sure that we understand that there is correct information coming from the departments to finance, and then really what finance is doing as well. The one area that we really focused in on this year was the payroll system. We tend to rotate through the different finance areas, whether it be accounts payable or, those types of things. But we always, at least once every 3 years, we are going to dig in hard to one of the systems to make sure that we're comfortable with the documentation, with the calculations, and really how things are impacting the ACFR, as Jenny mentioned. So we dug into the payroll system almost a year ago now. Wow, that's amazing, right? And we were comfortable with what we were seeing coming out of that system. So as long as there's no significant changes to who's doing the process next year or anything, we'll probably move on and test a different system next year for it. And then we came back in October. We're in the conference room for roughly 2 weeks. Once Jenny and the finance department tell us they're kind of done with their numbers for the year, and here's a draft of the financial statements, we come and sit and we just try to prove numbers incorrect, essentially. I mean, we're auditors. We like to find errors, I guess, or something. But so we sit there, we look at all kinds of invoices. We look at, deposits that were made, making sure that we're comfortable not only with how it was recorded, but where it was recorded. Because ultimately, the audit is just giving an opinion over those audited financial statements that are there. And so as part of that entire process, ends up that we're giving a clean opinion again on the city's financial statements and on Salem Convention Center and on the Urban Renewal Agency. What a clean opinion means is we are giving reasonable assurance there are no material errors within those financial statements, whether it be the numbers themselves or how that information is being presented in the financial statements, because there are generally accepted accounting principles that say how this stuff should be displayed within your financial statements. So again, the city got a clean opinion on those. And the city also submitted the ACFR for independent rating, which is something that the city has done historically. Getting a third party to say, yes, you're meeting generally accepted accounting principles, with the intent of getting a GFOA certificate again for this next year, saying we are not only meeting the requirement, but we're also reporting more information and just what is the basic essentials, including quite a bit of statistical information that you're going to see in the back of the financial statements themselves. So other than that, if we were going to talk about the other components that the auditors work on, the city is required to receive a federal compliance audit annually. Basically, if the city spends more than $750,000 in federal money during any fiscal year, a federal compliance audit kicks in, where the auditors, based on very specific criteria, look at different federal funding streams, look at grant agreements, look at how the money was spent, look at what reporting is necessary related to it. There's just a list of basic compliance things that could apply depending on what the funding stream is. That report is due March 31st. And right now it is sitting on my desk for my final review. And so Jenny, I don't even think you're aware of that. But it is in my court now. So the city will be seeing a draft of my report within a day or two. It's going to show that we looked at 2 programs this year. In total, we spent about 16 million, I believe, in federal funds this year. Out of that, we looked at 2 different programs, one being the HUD Home program. And then we looked at the Department of Transportation Highway Planning money. So the home program was a lot of like individual projects within the city community. I went and looked at the list, and there were things on there like some money went to the Center for Hope and Safety right behind us, Hope Plaza. Thank you for that, because that was great to watch all that building happening out there. But there were also in highway planning, lots of individual little projects within the city, whether it be like the McGill Crest project, lots of look like street corner projects, with like the crosswalks and stuff, all kinds of stuff like that. So what we do is we just take a sample of what was spent. We make sure it complies with the grant agreements, and we make sure that there's no material non-compliance related to that work. And as of right now, there are no findings in that program. I will do my due diligence on the work that my manager did, Toby, but I cannot imagine there's going to be any findings coming out of it. Part of that being the people that we work with who know what they're doing within those programs. And definitely Toby has been doing this for a while, so I understand he knows what he's doing as well. So I would not expect there to be any findings related to him. It'll be a clean opinion on that as well. Changes for next year. Potentially, there's really only 2 changes that I can think of that are going to impact your financial statements. One being there's a new requirement on how compensated absences is going to be calculated. Historically, it's basically been however many hours somebody has accrued, you take that times the wage rate, and you're going to put a liability in your book saying if all these people leave, this is how much money is going to be owed. It's just the cash amount. The calculation is changing slightly, where you're going to put in a benefits component of that too, or other things that are impacted based on somebody's wages. So you're going to see your compensated absences liability go up some, but that is just a year-end reporting item. That's not the cash component of it. It's really just how we're representing it within the financial statements. And then the other one, Jenny, if you're aware of it or not, there is a change in where the budgetary schedules are allowed to be within the financial statements. And so right now you have the general fund and maybe 1 or 2 other funds in your basic financial statements. Those are required to go back into RSI. They cannot be in your basic financial statements, which sounds like a simple fix, but in a document that's 250 pages long with table of contents and linking everywhere, it's going to take Jenny a little bit of time to get that fixed. That's kind of what I have for presentation. Really, I'm here just to answer questions if the finance committee has any questions for me.
Hey, Ryan, this is Paul. I'll start if that's okay, Madam Chair. This is my first time through the auditing process as a finance committee member. So maybe kind of basic questions, but curious how long you and your organization have been auditing the city of Salem?
Off and on to an extent. I personally, I've been auditing about 19 years. I've worked on this engagement off and on for 12 or 13 years, somewhere in there. I started as a staff member and I'm up to principal within my organization. But yeah, it's been off and on for a little bit in there.
But I guess what I'm hearing in your report is that it seems like there's benefit in staying with an auditor year over year because you're able to deep dive on an annual basis into different operations. Is that right?
Yeah, there's definitely conversations going both directions about using the same auditors, not using the same auditors. What clients need to understand is every year is really a fresh look at the city's operations. And I mean, the way that our risk assess or risk-based approach is, you really, yes, you have some carryover information, but you really want to make sure you're not just relying on what you've done in the past. You're looking at it again. And so basically that means every year our risks change based on what we see for work in there. If you're spending more federal money, we're going to focus time more on that side of things. If you've restructured some departments, we're going to look at what's changed within there. But really, all auditors follow a risk-based approach. I will say that, you know, year over year, it does make it easier when there's consistency, not only within your department, but within my staff, because a lot of the basic questions on how things work are already documented. And so as long as there's no significant changes, it speeds up the process for sure.
Okay, thanks.
Oh, absolutely. This is Julie Hoy, and I just have a quick question. The federal compliance audit, you said kicks in after a certain dollar amount. What dollar amount is that?
If the city expends currently more than $750,000 in federal funds in 1 year, then the audit kicks in. Sometimes I've got some clients where they hit that once every 5 years. Then I've got clients like the city of Salem, where there's quite a bit of federal money flowing through, especially in the last 2 or 3 years. And so it's every year there's a federal compliance audit.
Thank you. I guess that means that our folks are really good at finding money to help. Is that right?
Yeah, we consistently get quite a few federal dollars, especially on the transportation projects, the federal highway dollars. That's where we see consistently. We also for the FAA improvements there, we see consistent dollars there. And then other times we get larger grants like the RAISE grant from McGilchrist, items like that. So some on-offs, but we consistently well above $750,000.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Ryan.
Anybody else have any questions? Thank you, Ryan. You guys always do a great job. And Jenny, thank you.
Moving on, we have Tammy with Moss Adams. Turn it over to you, Tammy.
Great. Thank you so much. I'm going to do the hardest part of the presentation, which is share the correct screen. Thumbs up if it's the correct screen. Thank you. Okay, you're all the size of a small pinprick now as well. So if you do need to interrupt for questions, then please just make a noise so I know to do that. I'm pleased to be presenting the results of the Enterprise Leadership Performance Audit for the Finance Committee today. Just as a reminder, this work is a part of the city's efforts to investigate potential cost savings and efficiencies to help address its budget shortfall. Last fall, the city manager had requested that the city manager's office and the executive leadership team be the first to undergo this type of analysis as part of the performance audit program, which is conducted and overseen by the Finance Committee. Just for some brief context on the city manager's office, in the fiscal year 2025 budget, the CMO had a budget of approximately $1.5 million and 6 full-time employees. Over the past several years, the structure of the city manager's office has changed to include 2 deputy city managers, 1 over enterprise services and 1 over community services. Those were not new positions, those were repurposed positions. In addition to that, the city manager also oversees the police chief, the fire chief, the city attorney, the other department heads, as well as 2 executive assistants. Our objective for this analysis was to evaluate the city's leadership roles, responsibilities, and reporting structure. We also assessed the decision-making and processes used by city leadership, including communication and prioritization frameworks. And then finally, we assessed mayoral and city council support provided by the city manager's office. This performance audit was conducted under generally accepted government auditing standards, commonly referred to as GAGAS in the land of auditing. These standards provide a framework for conducting objective, systematic evaluations for government programs and operations. And to comply with these standards, we must be independent and have both sufficient and appropriate evidence to support our findings and recommendations, and both of those terms are defined within the audit standards. We also have very specific requirements around project oversight, review, and professional education to help ensure that another experienced auditor would reach the same conclusions if they were to review our analysis. So that's the standard by which this work was performed. To conduct this performance audit, we reviewed the city manager's office and executive leadership team staffing levels and available resources. We reviewed budget documents, including line item budget documents. We conducted interviews with about 30 staff and stakeholders, including all department directors, all individuals employed in the city manager's office, all of your previous mayor and council members, as well as 3 incoming council members. We reviewed documents including job descriptions, organizational charts, meeting minutes, and other reports that were available to us. To better understand peer and best practices, we did best practice research, and we also benchmarked Salem's resourcing and leadership practices against the cities of Beaverton, Bend, Eugene, Gresham, Hillsborough, and Medford. And the full results of that benchmarking analysis are included within Appendix B in our report. We wanted to start out by sharing some of the areas of strength that we noted throughout our analysis. These areas are important to note because they provide a strong foundation that the city can build upon to continuously improve its enterprise leadership practices. First and foremost, it is worth noting that the city has a very mission-driven and highly invested staff. From all of our conversation, it's evident that people care deeply about this community and its residents, and they are willing to put in extra effort to help improve service delivery and the community experience. We also have noted enhanced collaboration across departments and working together to achieve results, and the willingness to really be able to share in the successes that the city has been able to accomplish. The city also has several very tenured employees who have absorbed a wide variety of additional tasks over their time with the city, and also have very strong relationships and institutional knowledge that help them be able to propel work forward. And then finally, during this process, new council members were being onboarded, and we heard a lot of really great feedback about that process and that it was very service-oriented and helpful for new council members to be able to acclimate to their role. So we wanted to call that out as well. All right, so let's start out by talking about some of our results. We wanted to start with leadership capacity. Overall, we found that peer cities have between 6 and just about 30 full-time employees in their city managers' offices. Although Salem has the second highest population among peers, it is actually tied for the lowest city manager's office full-time employees with a city that is half its size, which is Medford. The city also has the lowest city manager's office full-time employees per 10,000 residents at 0.34, whereas the peer average is just a little bit over 1.2 FTEs per 10,000 residents. So to put this into context, Salem would need a total of 25 FTE in its city manager's office in order to achieve the peer average. And even if you were just looking across this table at the city that is of similar size in Eugene, you would need 11 additional employees to be able to match what that city is achieving. So this all demonstrates that the city manager's office is indeed understaffed in comparison to peers, and that understaffing impacts leadership functions and capacity across the city. Some of the notable ways are listed here on this slide. So at the time that we were completing our field work last fall and winter, the city manager had 12 direct reports. And that included, again, the 2 deputy city managers, the department heads, and then the 2 executive assistants. And best practices from the Society of Human Resources Management suggest that those top-level leaders should not have more than 8 to 10 direct reports, given their scope of work and the complexity involved in that work. Additionally, we found that the 2 deputy city manager workloads were unevenly distributed. So the deputy city manager of community services oversaw functions like parks and recreation, library, Center 50+, neighborhood services, cultural tourism, and the homeless liaison, and human rights and federal compliance manager, who does a lot of different things, as you can tell by the very lengthy job title. Whereas the deputy city manager for enterprise services oversaw a lot of very technical and more complex functions such as IT, HR, risk, fleet, facilities, and the customer service center. And within the Department of Enterprise Services, 2 of those functions of HR and IT also didn't have a director to be able to support their operations, which is uncommon in cities of the size of Salem, and also resulted in that deputy city manager needing to straddle both technical management of those functions as well as the strategic role at the city manager's office. When we consider the capacity of our leaders, we also should be considering how effectively are they really supported to be able to achieve their work. So we have 3 primary findings in this area. First of all, Salem relies on 2 strategic team members to do a wide swath of different activities with very minimal support. These positions are the Chief Strategy Officer and the Homelessness Liaison and Human Rights and Federal Compliance Manager, which is in fact 1 person. Both of these employees have significant responsibilities that impact city operations and very closely tie to city priorities. However, they do this work very independently and do work significant extra hours to try and fit everything in while needing to prioritize day to day. Both of these positions were routinely characterized by their peers as having the job of multiple personnel. The city manager's office also has 2 executive assistants. One is intended to provide support to the city manager and deputy city managers, and another is intended to provide support to the mayor. What we found is that in practice, these workloads were unevenly distributed between the 2 executive assistants. And the executive assistant that was supporting the mayor had additional capacity to support city initiatives. So really, we found that both of these executive assistants could be better utilized to help reduce workloads on the part of city leaders, including the city manager, the deputy city managers, and all elected officials. And then finally, the city manager's office continues to lack communication personnel. The city has tried to resource this function in different ways over the years, but has not yet found success in adopting a model that enables effective internal and external communication, which in turn can then impact community relations. So in the absence of centralized functions, the Chief Strategy Officer developed a communications team model that relies on staff that are actually out in departments to be able to pitch in on citywide communication initiatives. However, this means that communication continues to be decentralized and could be deprioritized. Just for comparison, 3 peer cities, including Beaverton, Bend, and Medford, all had centralized dedicated communications personnel to support city leaders and community relations. However, the budget situation in Salem has prevented the city from being able to adopt a similar model. So we developed several recommendations to help address these findings. These all related to realigning resources among the city's executive team to help right-size span of control, responsibility, and capacity. This included demoting the deputy city manager of community services to a director level role, reinstituting the HR and IT director level roles to support the Deputy City Manager of Enterprise Services, and also creating a team under the Chief Strategy Officer. This team would include the homelessness liaison and human rights and federal compliance manager. It would reorganize the executive assistants to report to that position and refocus one EA to provide support for the city manager's office and one EA to provide support to the mayor as well as additional council members. We've also recommended adding 2 communications positions, although we understand that the city's ability to actually implement that is entirely reliant on its ability to raise additional revenue. Those are some of the key findings and a sample organizational chart here. We also assessed communication, decision-making, and prioritization among city leaders. We found that executive leadership team meeting time could be used more effectively. Currently, that team meets once a week for 2 hours, and that meeting may include department heads, or it may include department heads plus additional employees and other sort of expanded leaders across the city. This represented a significant amount of time to those who were routinely participating in the meetings. And the participants also indicated that topics were often resurfaced in meeting and that the agenda setting and follow-up processes were unclear. And so some topics didn't progress forward as the team had anticipated. So for example, the city manager's executive assistant was not in these meetings, and therefore the chief strategy officer was the one actually taking and distributing notes for those meetings, which isn't necessarily the best use of that position's time and fully falls within the scope of the city manager's executive assistant. This closely relates to our finding that decisions were sometimes made using unclear processes and were seen as reactive to outside influences. This is problematic because the city is short-staffed, and so when new decisions or initiatives were presented, staff were essentially just required to add more to their plates. So to help better understand the impacts of these decisions, we actually completed an inventory of all ongoing initiatives at the city as of December 2024. We found at least 27 projects that were ongoing and sort of above and beyond normal operations. And we found that city leadership has struggled to prioritize among all of those different initiatives due to staff capacity limitations, which can lead to burnout among your team. So building this type of a tracking system could be useful to help keep track of your different initiatives, clearly delineate staff responsibilities and time commitments, and prioritize among the many things that the city is attempting to advance. So some of the recommendations here to enhance communication and prioritization were to enhance the executive leadership team meeting practices by developing really clear guidelines for agenda setting, audience selection, the cadence, and follow-up. The city manager's executive assistant can help enhance the logistics around this process. We also recommend that the city develop a decision-making framework to help determine when to invest its limited resources into an initiative. So typically, we see these frameworks include factors such as strategic plan alignment, community impact, total cost, and staff capacity to help inform those decisions and what can we pursue and what can we not pursue. The unfortunate reality is the city cannot do everything, and it needs to consider what we refer to as the total cost of ownership and staff capacity into its decisions, given its resource constraints. To keep track of those initiatives that it does choose to move forward with, the city should establish a system to be able to track these projects, including delineating the responsible individual, the costs, and the progress over time. The system could also include a prioritization framework so that employees know what is most important to accomplish without feeling like everything is high priority all the time, which again can lead to burnout. And then our last finding and recommendation area relates to mayoral and council support. As you all know, council positions are volunteer, but they require a significant amount of time to review and digest all of the information in your packets prior to meetings. We heard some feedback from council members that it would be helpful to have those packets farther in advance to allow for more time to digest that information. We also heard that there could be more work done in committees to help facilitate deeper conversation on specific topics without necessarily requiring that same level of discussion among the full council at large. And then finally, we found that the city leaders spend a considerable amount of time tracking down responses to community requests or complaints. And those complaints can come in through a variety of sources. It can come in through public comment. It can come in through a council member email, a direct email to an individual. And so there's a lot of different ways that those constituent requests are sort of made. But when we don't have a system to be able to track those, that means that there can be duplicative efforts as individuals are sort of tracking down the appropriate answer or the appropriate person to provide an answer and provide a response to that constituent. And that could be better managed through a constituent management system. So our recommendations to enhance mayoral and council support and to encourage the council members to attend pre-meeting briefings. Those briefings are usually about 30 minutes and they provide the opportunity for council members to ask questions of city staff about particular topics, gain an understanding of the issue prior to going into the meeting and discussing the policy at large, which of course you want to be in that open forum. It's just that information gathering process in the pre-meeting briefings. Many of our city clients have those meetings either one-on-one or in groups of 2 to be able to help enhance their council meetings. We also encourage the city to provide council meeting packets farther in advance, if at all possible, to allow for that greater review time, since these are volunteer positions and many of you do have commitments outside of this role. And then finally, establishing a centralized request management system, which can help reduce that duplicative work that I spoke about, as well as inefficiencies in leaders who are trying to track down information on the same topic. We did receive several examples of that during our field work. So what that system does is it would allow the recipient of that complaint or request, whether that's a council member or a member of staff or someone wants to log it from public comment, to essentially log this within the constituent management system, assign the request to someone to be able to help streamline the response process. And this is an activity that the executive assistant, who would be dedicated to help support elected officials in the city, could help manage and triage. And it's actually already included within their job description. And that concludes our presentation, and I'm happy to accept questions and discussion.
Any questions?
I don't have a question, I do have a comment though.
Okay.
If that is that all right?
Please.
Awesome. I really appreciate all the work done on this. The key recommendations sounded pretty good to me. I would love to hear what other committee members think. And looking at my notes, I mean, having more council, having more administrative support from the city staff would be extremely helpful for me. I don't know about y'all, but it's a lot, especially when you start diving into these committees. It's really helpful. And I love the concept of the centralized request management system or a portal or something. On the one hand, it doesn't have the same personal touch as someone emails me and I email them back like, oh my God, my counselor emailed me back. This is amazing. Until they tell them, well, actually, I can do this, this, and this. And no, I can't change the zoning. It's just for your one little street. But other than that, but I mean, there's so many times where I don't have time to respond to all the well-intentioned emails that come to us. So many people want to let us know how they feel. And when it comes to constituent requests for everything from speed bumps to traffic lights to sidewalks, I mean,
Parking lot.
it's just there's so much. And our charter was designed for a city where you could do all this in an afternoon, right? I mean, when all these rules were designed, I mean, we had a much smaller city, and we've outgrown that model. So I personally love the idea of having a link that people can point to. But I also want to stay in touch. I don't want to just hand off a link to my constituents, say, bye, see ya. I mean, I think it's important that we show that we care. If someone takes the trouble of contacting you about a neighborhood concern, I want to know what the response is. I want to know what the result is. And I want to help facilitate that without getting in the way, so. How you make all that magic happen, I'm not paid for that, well, not paid. So, but I would so love that. Would so love that. Those are just some of the things. There's a million things to talk about here, but I want to just take one little bite and then have room for others to talk.
So if I may add a comment to that, I think with the city manager's office workload, then to be able to give that some kind of a portal where we can kind of see all the requests together. And just kind of from a pure efficiency perspective and the workload perspective, to me, it kind of makes sense to move forward with the decentralized records management as a priority. And I think there is an opportunity here also to help the city manager's office working. You know, to kind of gives that structure to it. And I think it also makes the so we'll be able to.
Yes, sir.
I'm kind of on the same board of that, kind of the efficiency aspect of it, because in my mind, that's something where, like, if I ask a question and I send it to Josh and Councilor Taggart asks the same question, but he sends it to you, Krishna. We're asking the same question, now you're both going down to track out the information as opposed to sending it to a centralized place that the EA is able to kind of distribute out to the right person. So I think that makes a lot of sense. I guess the other question I'd have, and this is something necessarily for this week, but if you're able to send it, you mentioned there were 27 projects that are currently ongoing above the job requirements. And if those could be sent out to the councilors just so we can see what's really being done, it's above here.
Absolutely. Those initiatives are included in Appendix C of the full report.
I guess I would just share in response, and also looking at the response from management to the recommendations. It seems that you've kind of concurred with all of the findings in the report. But the findings in the report sort of, they don't demand, but they do ask for action, right? And so they themselves become thrown into the prioritization hopper. And I appreciate what you said, Krishna, just in terms of, well, a centralized system for constituent requests would probably help. But I just kind of want to acknowledge that. I feel like, and thanks Tammy for all your work and your team's work on this. I think the thing that is going to continue to persist as a problem, and the story that comes from this audit is really that the city manager's office is woefully under-resourced. And we don't need a Cadillac version of the city manager's office. If we looked at that chart, we don't need a 50-person team running communications and things like that across the city. But even to get to an average sized office is 4 times the size of the office you have. And to me, that just, we're going to continue to, you know, the work isn't going to get lighter. You know, it's just going to keep flowing at the team. And unless okay, maybe we have a centralized system, but to triage things. But I think as a council, we really need to think about what is it going to look like for you to have enough resources to manage this operation? Because right now, I think so much of the sand in the gears comes from the folks at the top spending too much time in the weeds and not enough time at a strategic moment. And the response that the staff gave was, well, we know we're not going to have the resources this year. And in the budget that has to be proposed, the question is, are we going to have sufficient resources if the levy passes, if we get money from the state? I think it's going to be really tempting for the council to want to do other things. But I think we really need to continue to consider the shape of the city manager's office in a way that, you know, seeds success across the entire organization.
So yeah, no, it's okay. I mean, actually really good points, right? Like, so what I would like to add there is understanding that we are under budget deficit, right? So we can't fill or add more positions to the city manager's office. But I think right now, what we really have to be focusing on, I think it's an opportunity to look at our priorities and kind of have that focus on what we're going to work on today. So that's the kind of the piece that we have to work on. I think to Tammy's point, when we have 27 different initiatives, it is a lot, right? So I think the opportunity we have here and the leadership team will work on this together is to identify the things that we really have to be focusing on those 27. So that's kind of what we have to do today. And with doing that, we do have to expand the capacity of the city manager's office and we have to serve the community effectively and responsibly. So that.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that we need to take these things like decision by decision, but if we find ourselves in a much more constrained environment on July 1st, then I think it's incumbent on the city to come to the city council, to the city leadership to come to the city council and say, these are the 27 above and beyond things that we're being asked to do. Here's the 6 we can concentrate on. And we need to create the sort of cover and prioritization with our community to say like, look, this is what we have the ability to do and we can't do these other things.
I'm curious, Councilor Tigan, why does that wait till July? Can we not look at that 27 thing list?
Well, no, that's a super good point. And I think in some ways we need to, maybe that's part of the story of the budget that we're gonna need to adopt before we know the outcome of the levy, right? It's also incumbent on looking at that list.
Do you want to add?
We do have the intent to take this report forward to the city council in a work session. April 21st, I think, is the date we're holding. So that might be an opportunity to start that conversation about priorities among the items that are referenced in the report. We have been, as I think you're aware, we're doing a strategic plan again starting in July. And so we're in that strange space where we have priorities from before, mostly in action and some form, and are about to start inviting community input and council input on what should the next 5 years look like and what are those priorities. And so we haven't had that conversation lately to what should we focus on, because we're in that weird space between. But certainly April 21st could be a good launch.
I'm concerned with that, you have a question?
Well, yeah, I have lots of comments. I also just want to be mindful of time. I think that sounds great. I mean, I was going to suggest an implementation process similarly to how the climate action plan came out with 183 strategies. You couldn't implement them all at once, even if you wanted to. And so having a work plan for how we move these recommendations forward, I think is something that council should work on collaboratively with the city, but I really want input. A lot of these are nuts and bolts decisions where I'm not the expert on what makes the most sense for you guys. Can look at these recommendations and think of what's the low-hanging fruit that we could start working on right now. What are the ones where we're going to need a lot more direction on council on? Do we implement it? And if so, is it our first priority, second priority, and so on? So this is an area where we are meddling in your daily operations, which some city leaders don't like it when councils do that. I can't imagine why. But if you really want our input on how you run your departments and such, I want to be mindful of where our role is distinct from your role, so.
May I add something to that? I just want to be helpful. I don't want to be in the way. But to know what the priorities are, and April 21st sounds like a long ways away. And I don't want to move any faster than we need to on prioritization, but I also don't want to slow the opportunity. So if there's something we can do in soon to help relieve some of the pressure and focus the energy on what it is we need to do. Namely, maybe, you know, like a levy or a budget or something like that, we could work on those things. And whatever else is deemed like the most important thing to do right now. And like you said, low hanging fruit, great, get it done, get it out the door. But the stuff that requires a lot, we need to push out. Or the stuff that requires a lot, like the budget.
And I think it probably depends, Mayor, on what other work sessions we already have planned between now and then. There may be some time sensitive matters that we have to get done, but yeah, I mean, there may be bits and pieces we could talk about sooner, but later.
And so the staff within the city manager's office and the leadership team, we will be having conversations around those low hanging fruits that we can work on and kind of having some stuff in place to kind of help with the employee workload. So we'll be working on that. I think there's more to come before April 21st. But for me, the two focus areas is the budget and the work that we have to done before March 20th on the levy. Okay, so those are the two things that we're working on. And as far as looking at the rest of the list, maybe we can look at what is kind of urgent that we have to do and what is the stuff that we can pause on. So definitely do some more.
And if I need to answer the phone and take complaints, I'll do it.
I've got kind of a little bit of experience. Sorry. Just a little bit. So I can say, well, I'm wondering, within our current fiscal year budget, does the city manager's office budget have some money that can be spent on some of these items between now and the end of our fiscal year? I'm just wondering what leeway we have within this year's budget. We've approved a certain amount of money for various things. We even have money in our budget to start implementing any of these things.
I think often the constraint is staff resources.
Yeah.
Not always actually more dollars in the budget, unless you have full staff resources. Those literally having the bodies and the hours that move these projects forward.
So we have 8 minutes left and we have 2 items remaining. Does anybody have any more questions on this? I don't mean to rush you.
Good.
So 5B1.
Yeah, Tammy, do you want to move on to your second item?
Absolutely. Let me just get it up. Okay. You can't see that? Only I can. All right, we're gonna get there. Okay. So we wanted to give you all a very quick update, 8 minutes. I'm gonna be really fast on the Performance and Internal Audit Program. So this is a little bit about performance audits. I sort of just described what these are in the prior presentation around our standards with generally accepted government auditing standards. The City of Salem, the Finance Committee last fall approved the following project criteria to sort of understand which projects would be prioritized for this program as we work through a series of functions. And the city had, the Finance Committee rather, had approved these 3 programs or these 3 performance audits within the performance audit program for this fiscal year. So as you can see, we did the Enterprise Leadership Performance Audit that is complete. The URA performance audit is in progress. And then we had also planned to do an IT performance audit and we're in scoping. However, with the changes taken place at the city recently, we would like to propose switching this for a different project given just staff capacity and their constraints right now with Krishna taking over a new position. So we would like to recommend that the next priority level that was discussed at the October Finance Committee meeting be considered for its replacement. And that was a risk management performance audit to look at claims and identify potential risk mitigation opportunities here. We wanted to put that forward for the committee's consideration.
We need a motion for that.
I think a motion would be
I move that we replace the IT performance audit with the risk management audit as recommended by Moss Adams.
Second,
Yeah, I'll second that.
second by Megan, all in favor?
I
Aye, motion passes. Okay. Motion passes. Perfect. So do we have time, do you think, for 5C? Your quarterly investment?
So 5C is the quarterly investment report. Nothing really new to note there. We're still getting pretty good returns on our investment earnings. Happy to address any specific questions you might have. We don't have to do that here, but if you have questions, feel free to send me.
Did everyone have an opportunity to review that?
Oh, I looked at it.
And
I don't have any questions today.
so we don't have any continued business, right? No new business. So we're adjourned if no one has any questions. Our meeting's adjourned.